The colony ship Horizon's End drifted through the darkness near Proxima Centauri. Inside, 50,000 humans went about their daily lives. Children attended school in the ship's education center. Farmers tended to crops in the hydroponic bays. Engineers checked systems that had kept them alive for 20 years of travel. Commander Jack Miller stood on the bridge watching the stars. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes. Jack had been a firefighter on Earth before volunteering for this mission. He wanted his grandchildren to grow up under an alien sun, to have entire worlds to explore. "Commander, we have contact," said Lieutenant Amy Chen from her station. Her voice was calm but confused. 17 ships just appeared out of nowhere. Jack turned to look at the screen. The ships were beautiful, made of what looked like crystal and light. They were also enormous. Each one was 10 times the size of Horizon's End. "Open communications," Jack ordered. "Let's say hello to our new neighbors." The screen flickered to life. The creature that appeared was nothing like a human. It had 6 eyes arranged in a circle and skin that shifted colors like oil on water. When it spoke, the translation software struggled for a moment before words came through. "You will surrender your vessel immediately. You are now subjects of the hegemony of 12 stars. Any resistance will result in your termination." Jack felt the bridge go silent. Everyone was looking at him. These were colonists, not soldiers. They had come to space to build a new home, not to fight a war. "This is Commander Jack Miller of the Earth ship Horizon's End," he said clearly. "We are a peaceful colony mission. We mean no harm to anyone. May we discuss this?" The aliens' colors shifted to what looked like amusement. "There is nothing to discuss. You will surrender or you will die. You have 60 seconds to comply." Jack's mind raced. He thought of his wife Sandra, working in the medical bay. His son Tom was teaching a mathematics class right now. His granddaughter Lucy was probably playing in the recreation area with her friends. "Can you give us a moment to discuss this among ourselves?" Jack asked. 50 seconds, the alien replied. Jack turned to his crew. "Options?" "We can't fight them," said his security officer Greg Foster. "We have mining lasers and that's about it. Those ships could destroy us in seconds." "We can't surrender either," said Maria Rodriguez from the science station. "Look at the scans. Those ships have holding areas. They're slavers." Jack nodded slowly. He had already made his decision. He turned back to the screen. "I would like to show you something," Jack said to the alien. "May I transmit some files?" "See." Alien's eyes narrowed. "You may. 20 seconds remain." Jack pulled up files from the ship's database. He sent videos of Earth, children playing in parks, laughing as they went down slides, elderly couples walking hand in hand through gardens, babies taking their first steps while their parents cheered, families having dinner together, people helping strangers on the street, humans crying at funerals, dancing at weddings, hugging their loved ones. "These are who you threaten," Jack said quietly. "These are the people on this ship. We came to the stars in peace. We wanted to be good neighbors. But if you force us to choose between slavery and death, know that humans will always choose freedom. We respectfully decline your offer." The alien's colors shifted to something that might have been surprise, then anger. "Then you have chosen death." The screen went dark. Jack turned to his communications officer. "Send a message to Earth everything that just happened. Tell them we love them." Amy's hands flew over her console. "Message sent, Commander." "Greg, can we ram them?" Jack asked. Greg checked his console. "We could hit one of them, maybe damage it." "Do it. Aim for the lead ship. All hands, this is the commander. Brace for impact." The Horizon's End turned slowly toward the crystal ship. Jack could see weapons charging on the alien vessels. He thought about all the people on his ship. They had trusted him to keep them safe. He had failed. But maybe their deaths would mean something. Maybe Earth would know what was out there. Maybe they would be ready. The first beam hit the Horizon's End, tearing through the hull like paper. Jack felt the ship shudder. Alarm screamed. Air rushed out into space. "Keep going," he shouted over the noise. Another beam hit. The lights flickered and died. Emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in red light. Jack could hear screams from other parts of the ship. 10 seconds to impact, Greg reported. Jack grabbed the communication system. "This is the commander. It has been an honor serving with all of you." The Horizon's End slammed into the crystal ship at full speed. The collision was devastating for the human vessel. It broke apart instantly, spilling its precious cargo of human life into the cold vacuum of space. But the crystal ship cracked. A small crack, but a crack nonetheless. The hegemony ships watched as 50,000 humans died in seconds. They collected the wreckage to study this new species. They sent reports back to their capital about the easy victory. They did not understand what they had just done. The message from Horizon's End took 4 years to reach Earth at the speed of light. When it arrived, it was received by a communication station in Australia. The operator, a young woman named Katie Brown, watched the video with growing horror. She immediately sent it up the chain of command. Within hours, President Lisa Coleman was watching the final moments of Horizon's End in the Situation Room, surrounded by her advisors. They watched Jack Miller show the aliens videos of human children. They heard him choose death over slavery. They watched 50,000 humans die. The room was silent for a long moment after the video ended. "How many colony ships do we have out there?" Lisa asked quietly. 7 more, Madam President," answered General Frank Cooper. "All unarmed, all vulnerable." Lisa stood up slowly. She was a small woman, but in that moment, she seemed to fill the room. "Call an emergency session of the World Congress. Every nation, every leader." "What are you going to propose?" asked her Secretary of State. Lisa's eyes were hard as steel. "War. Total war. They killed 50,000 civilians, families, children. They gave them 60 seconds to choose between slavery and death." She walked to the window, looking up at the stars. "They think we're weak because we chose to explore space in peace. They're about to learn why humans were the apex predators of Earth for thousands of years." The World Congress convened within 48 hours. Leaders from every nation on Earth watched the video from Horizon's End. They saw their species' children floating dead in space. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in human history, every nation agreed on one thing. The hegemony would pay for what they had done. Factories that made cars started making weapons. Scientists who studied medicine started studying alien physiology for weaknesses. Every spacecraft design was retrofitted for war. Humanity had tried to be peaceful among the stars. Now they would show the galaxy what humans did to those who hurt their children. The hegemony had no idea what was coming. They had fought wars before. They had conquered species before. But they had never fought humans. They had never faced a species that would burn the galaxy to ash to avenge their dead. The war was about to begin, and when it ended, the galaxy would whisper humanity's name in fear for generations to come. 6 months had passed since the World Congress voted for war. Earth looked different now. The cities that once glowed with advertisements and entertainment now hummed with the sound of factories working day and night. Parks where children used to play had been turned into training grounds. Universities that taught art and literature now focused on alien biology and ship engineering. Dr. Kevin Park stood in what used to be his pediatric hospital. The colorful walls covered with cartoon characters had been painted gray. The rooms, where he once saved children's lives, now housed weapons that violated every rule of war the galaxy had ever written. Kevin had been a good man. He still was in his own mind. But good men could do terrible things when their people were threatened. He looked at his latest creation, a small device no bigger than a baseball. "What does it do?" asked Maria Rodriguez, who worked in the lab next door. She used to develop crops to feed the Mars colony. Now she designed things that killed. Kevin picked up the device carefully. "It targets nervous systems, makes every nerve fire at once. The pain is beyond description. Death takes about 3 minutes, but it feels like forever." Maria didn't flinch. 6 months ago, she would have been horrified. Now she just nodded. "How many can we make?" "Thousands," Kevin answered. "Maybe millions if we get the resources." They both knew they would get the resources. Earth had changed. Every person from age 16 to 80 was part of the war effort now. Children younger than 16 were sent to hidden bunkers with a small group of teachers and caretakers. Humanity was preparing for the worst while hoping for the best. Indy. Orbit above Earth, the shipyards worked without stopping. Admiral Greg Foster stood on the bridge of humanity's first real warship, the Vengeance. It wasn't pretty like the alien crystal ships. It was dark gray, angular, and built for one purpose: killing. "Admiral, long-range sensors are picking up movement near Neptune," reported Captain Amy Chen. She had been promoted after showing exceptional skill in combat simulations. Greg looked at the display. 40 hegemony ships were approaching. They moved in perfect formation, confident in their superiority. "They think this will be easy," Greg said. "They're about to learn otherwise. Signal the fleet. Operation Hammer Falls is a go." The human fleet was smaller, only 20 ships, but humans had learned something important from studying the wreckage of Horizon's End. The alien shields were perfect against energy weapons. They were useless against simple kinetic force. Every human ship was equipped with railguns that fired tungsten rods at incredible speeds. It was primitive technology by galactic standards. It was also devastatingly effective. The hegemony fleet sent a transmission. The same six-eyed species appeared on screen. "Primitive species, you will surrender immediately. Your resistance is pointless. We are the hegemony. We have ruled for 3,000 years. Greg smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "This is Admiral Greg Foster of Earth. You killed 50,000 civilians. There will be no surrender. There will be no mercy." The aliens' colors shifted to what might have been amusement. "You have 20 primitive ships. We have 40 superior vessels. You cannot win." "Watch us," Greg replied, and cut the transmission. The battle began at a distance of 1,000,000 kilometers. The hegemony ships fired their energy beams, confident they would slice through the primitive human vessels. The beams hit the human ships and did damage, but not as much as expected. Humans had coated their ships with ablative armor that absorbed and dispersed energy. Then the humans fired back. The tungsten rods traveled at 10% the speed of light. The hegemony shields, designed to stop energy, did nothing to stop simple metal moving at incredible speed. The first rod punched through a crystal ship like it was made of glass. The ship exploded in a shower of beautiful, deadly fragments. Phew, hegemony fleet tried to adapt, but humans didn't give them time. The railguns fired again and again. Crystal ships shattered. Alien crews died in the vacuum of space. But the humans were taking damage too. The energy beams were getting through, killing crew members, destroying systems. The ship Defiance lost all power and started drifting. That's when Captain Amy Chen did something that would be remembered forever. Her ship, the Liberty, was badly damaged. Half her crew was dead. The engines were failing. She had perhaps minutes before the ship exploded. A rational commander would have ordered evacuation. Amy ordered full speed toward the hegemony flagship. "Captain, we won't survive the impact," her helmsman said. Amy stood up, blood running down her face from a head wound. "I know, but neither will they. All hands, this is the captain. It has been my honor. For Earth, for Horizon's End, the Liberty." Accelerated toward the massive crystal ship. The hegemony commander realized what was happening too late. The human ship slammed into the bridge of the flagship at full speed. The explosion was visible from Earth with telescopes. Both ships were completely destroyed. But as the Liberty died, Amy Chen's laughter was broadcast on all frequencies. She was laughing as she died, taking her enemies with her. The remaining hegemony ships fled. They had come with 40 ships. They left with 12. The humans had lost 8 ships, but they had won. The aftermath of the battle changed everything. The hegemony sent messages to all their subject species about the insane humans who laughed while dying. They warned about the primitive weapons that ignored shields. They spoke of a species that chose mutual destruction over defeat. Other species in the galaxy began to take notice. The Zathan, oldest of the spacefaring races, sent observers to watch the humans. The Trilix Merchant Union started avoiding human space. Everyone was asking the same question. What kind of species were these humans? Back on Earth, the factories increased production. Dr. Kevin Park's neural weapons were mass-produced. Maria Rodriguez created a bacteria that could survive in space and eat through any organic material. Engineers designed ships that were nothing but engines and bombs, meant to ram enemy vessels. General Frank Cooper, now Supreme Commander of all human forces, stood before the World Congress to give his report. "We won the first battle," he said. "But this is just the beginning. The hegemony will come back with hundreds of ships, maybe thousands. We need to be ready." President Lisa Coleman stood up. "What do you need, General?" "Everything," Frank answered. "Every resource, every person, every idea. We need to become something the galaxy has never seen. We need to become their nightmare." The vote was unanimous. Again, humanity would give everything. Children grew up learning how to fight. Television shows were replaced with military training videos. Music was replaced with the sound of factories. Art was replaced with weapon designs. But it wasn't enough to just build weapons. Humans needed to change how they thought about war. The galaxy fought with rules, with honor. Humans decided to fight to win. Captain Tony Martinez came up with the idea of wolf packs, small, fast ships painted completely black, invisible against the darkness of space. They would hunt enemy supply lines, destroying food shipments and fuel tankers. Lieutenant Alice Brown suggested biological warfare, not to kill but to terrify. Diseases that made scales fall off, that turned skin different colors, that caused temporary blindness, make the enemy afraid to fight. Every human contributed ideas. A 10-year-old girl suggested putting recordings of human laughter in bombs so enemies would hear it before they died. A 90-year-old man designed bullets that screamed as they flew. A teenager created a computer virus that made enemy ships play human nursery rhymes before self-destructing. The galaxy had awakened something terrible. Humans weren't just fighting a war. They were turning war itself into a horror story. 3 months after the Battle of Neptune, as it came to be known, humanity launched its first offensive. 30 ships, all painted black, slipped through space toward a hegemony supply depot. The depot supplied food to 5 hegemony worlds. It was considered safe, far from any front lines. The skeleton crew of defenders never saw the humans coming. The black ships appeared out of nowhere, railguns firing. The depot's defenses crumbled in minutes. But the humans didn't stop there. They landed troops who planted Kevin Park's neural weapons throughout the station. They contaminated the food supplies with Maria Rodriguez's bacteria. They left a message written in the blood of the defenders. For Horizon's End. When hegemony relief ships arrived, they found the depot intact, but everyone on it dead, their faces twisted in agony. They found the contaminated food had been shipped to 3 worlds before the attack. Millions were already sick. The hegemony realized they had made a terrible mistake. They had awakened something that should have been left alone. Humans didn't just fight wars. They transformed war into something from nightmares. The hegemony's response to the depot attack was swift and without mercy. Their fleet admirals gathered in the crystal chambers of their capital world and decided that humanity needed to be taught a lesson. They would not just defeat the humans. They would break them. 3 human colonies had been established before the war: New Eden, Paradise, and Haven. Each held between 2 and 3 billion humans. Families who had left Earth seeking adventure and new lives among the stars. They had minimal defenses, just some mining equipment and basic security forces. The hegemony fleet arrived at New Eden first. 200 ships surrounded the green and blue world. Admiral Korthax, Supreme Commander of the hegemony forces, didn't even bother with demands for surrender. He simply gave the order. The orbital bombardment lasted 6 hours. Energy beams turned forests into ash. Oceans boiled, cities melted into glass, mountains crumbled. When the hegemony ships finally stopped firing, New Eden was a ball of molten rock. 2 billion humans died in those 6 hours. Men, women, children, all gone. Paradise fell next. The colonists there had received a warning from New Eden before it died. They tried to evacuate, loading people onto any ship that could fly. They managed to save 50,000. 3 billion others died when the hegemony glasses their world. Haven was last. By the time the hegemony arrived, most of the population had fled underground into mine shafts and bunkers. It didn't matter. The hegemony bombed until the planet's crust cracked. Lava flowed from the wounds in the earth. Another 2 billion dead. In 1 week, the hegemony had killed 7 billion humans. The news reached Earth along with video footage from a merchant ship that had witnessed Paradise's destruction. President Lisa Coleman watched the recording in silence. Her cabinet waited for her to speak. When she finally did, her voice was empty of emotion. They just killed 7 billion civilians. Children, babies, elderly. They didn't even ask for surrender. General Frank Cooper placed a folder on her desk. "This is Operation Consequence. I need your authorization." Lisa opened the folder and read. Her face went pale. "This is genocide, Frank." "Yes," Frank said simply. "They killed 7 billion of ours. This plan will kill 70 billion of theirs." "We'll become monsters," Lisa said quietly. "We already are," Frank replied. "The question is whether we're successful monsters or dead ones." Lisa signed the authorization. Her hand shook, but she signed. Admiral John Davis had been a philosophy professor before the war. He taught ethics at Harvard, wrote books about morality and human nature. Now he commanded the fleet called Consequence, named after the operation. He understood what he was about to do. He would become history's greatest mass murderer. He accepted this. The agricultural world of Thessex fed a third of hegemony space. It was a peaceful planet, covered in vast farms tended by a species called the Gentle Ones. They were pacifists, had been for thousands of years. They grew food because it brought them joy. John's fleet arrived in the middle of Thessex's harvest season. The Gentle Ones sent messages of confusion. They were not warriors. They had no weapons. Surely the humans had come to the wrong place. John sent a single response. "The hegemony killed 7 billion human civilians. You feed the hegemony. That makes you complicit." Lieutenant Commander Alice Brown led the ground assault. Her troops didn't use conventional weapons. They used something far worse, gray goo. Self-replicating nanobots that converted organic matter into more nanobots. Alice personally released the first canister into Thessex's largest grain field. The gray spread like water. Every plant it touched turned to gray sludge, which became more nanobots, which spread further. Within hours, entire continents were being consumed. The Gentle Ones tried to run, but where could they go? Their entire world was dying. The hegemony sent relief ships carrying food and evacuation transports. Captain Tony Martinez's wolf pack was waiting. The black ships came out of nowhere, destroying the relief vessels before they could even send distress signals. The evacuation ships were left floating in space, broadcasting the screams of the dying to every hegemony world. But Tony didn't stop there. He had his crews board the destroyed ships and arrange the bodies. When the next wave of hegemony ships arrived, they found their dead floating in space, arranged to spell out words in human language. This is what happens when you kill human children. The hegemony's other agricultural worlds received packages, small boxes that appeared in their grain storage, their water supplies, their atmosphere processors. Each box contained a simple message and a vial of gray goo held in stasis. The message read, "Thessex fed you. Now Thessex is dead. You have 72 hours to convince the hegemony to surrender, or your world joins Thessex." 3 worlds immediately declared independence from the hegemony. 5 others begged for mercy. The hegemony executed the leaders of all 8 worlds for cowardice and sent battle fleets to maintain order. That's when humanity revealed they had been holding back. The battle fleet sent to Kalos system found something impossible waiting for them. A human ship the size of a moon. It wasn't a warship in any traditional sense. It was a mining vessel that had been converted into something from nightmares. Its entire hull was covered in railguns, thousands of them. When the hegemony fleet of 300 ships approached, every railgun fired at once. The space around Kalos turned into a storm of tungsten death. Ships didn't just break, they were shredded into dust. The few survivors reported that the human ship never stopped firing. It was like fighting a metal storm. Dr. Susan White, Earth's lead xenopsychologist, published a paper that was transmitted on all frequencies to every inhabited world. She explained human psychology in simple terms. You want to understand humans? We evolved on a death world. Everything on our planet tried to kill us. Weather, animals, diseases, even other humans. We survived by being more violent, more cunning, more willing to do whatever it took. Then we learned compassion. We chose to be kind. We chose to be peaceful. But that was a choice. When you killed our children, you took away that choice. Now you see what we are without it. We are the apex predator of a death world, and you have reminded us why. The neutral species of the galaxy called for an emergency session. The Zathan, who had lived in space for 50,000 years, spoke first. The humans must be stopped. Not for the hegemony's sake, but for all our sakes. They fight without rules. They turn food supplies into weapons. They use terror as a tool. If they defeat the hegemony, who will be next? The Trilix merchant representative disagreed. The humans only attacked those who hurt them. We have trade agreements with Earth. They have been nothing but honorable with us. For now, the Zathan replied. But what happens when they run out of enemies? What happens when this generation of warriors has no one left to fight? Before anyone could answer, a human diplomat entered the chamber. Carl Thompson was an older man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He didn't look like someone from a species, committing genocide. Ladies and gentlemen, Carl said calmly, I have been authorized to show you something. He played the video from Horizon's End. The alien representatives watched Jack Miller show the hegemony images of human children playing. They heard him choose death over slavery. They watched 50,000 civilians die. Then, Carl continued, the hegemony killed 7 billion more civilians. Children, babies, elderly. They glassed 3 worlds without even asking for surrender. Carl looked around the room. We offered them our friendship. They chose war. We showed them mercy. They showed us none. Every action we have taken has been a response to their choices. If you want us to stop, convince them to surrender. Otherwise, stay out of our way. He left without waiting for a response. Back in human space, the factories continued their terrible work. Every human contributed to the war effort. Children collected scrap metal. The elderly assembled weapons. Artists painted. Warships black. Musicians composed songs that would be broadcast during attacks to terrify enemies. A new weapon was deployed. The screamers. Missiles that broadcasted the sounds of dying children as they flew. The psychological effect was devastating. Enemy. Crews would freeze, unable to function, as they heard what sounded like their own young dying. Lieutenant Betty Wilson, commanding the dreadnought Retribution, perfected a new tactic. She would cripple enemy ships but not destroy them. Then she would wait. Wait as their life support slowly failed. Wait as they sent increasingly desperate distress calls. Only when the crew was on the verge of death would she offer them a choice. Record a message begging the hegemony to surrender, or die forgotten in the void. Most chose to record the messages. The few who refused were left to die slowly, their final moments broadcast to their homeworlds. The galaxy watched in horror as humanity transformed war into something unrecognizable. This wasn't conquest. This wasn't even revenge anymore. This was extermination executed with the cold efficiency of a species that had turned survival into a science. And still, the hegemony refused to surrender. Year 3 of the war began with humanity unveiling Project Nemesis. The project had been conceived by Colonel Paul Johnson, a man who had lost everything when Horizon's End was destroyed. His wife, his daughter, his grandchildren, all gone in an instant. Paul had spent 2 years designing something that would make the galaxy understand true horror. The hegemony capital world of Xerion was considered untouchable, protected by 1,000 ships and orbital defense platforms, surrounded by minefields and sensor nets that could detect anything approaching from light years away. It was home to 40 billion hegemony citizens, including their ruling council. Paul's team didn't approach through space. They had been smuggled in over months, hidden in cargo containers, disguised as slaves, some surgically altered to look like other species. 40 humans had infiltrated the most secure planet in hegemony space. On the 3rd anniversary of Horizon's End's destruction, they released the Screaming Death. The bioweapon was Kevin Park's masterpiece of cruelty. It was a virus that rewired nervous systems, turning every nerve ending into a pain receptor set to maximum sensitivity. A gentle breeze felt like being burned alive. A soft touch was agony beyond description. Even breathing became torture. But the virus did something else too. It prevented unconsciousness. It prevented death. For exactly 72 hours, the infected remained fully aware, fully conscious, feeling every second of unbearable agony. They couldn't even scream properly because the act of screaming hurt too much. The virus started in the lower districts where the poor lived. The hegemony leadership didn't notice at first. Then it spread to the markets, then the government buildings. By the time they understood what was happening, half the planet was infected. The ruling council watched from their sealed chambers as their capital world died in agony. They could see the streets filled with beings trying desperately not to move, not to breathe, not to exist, but unable to die. The worst part was the sound. 40 billion beings whimpering in pain created a noise that could be heard from orbit. After exactly 72 hours, the infected began to die. But as they died, their bodies released spores. The spores spread on the wind, through the water system, through the air recyclers. Within days, the entire planet was infected. The Hegemony Council tried to flee. Their personal ships launched from hidden platforms, racing toward the edge of the system. That's when they learned that humanity had been waiting. Commander Betty Wilson's dreadnought Retribution dropped out of hyperspace directly in their path. Her ship was alone, one vessel against 20 elite guard ships. It should have been suicide. Betty broadcast on all frequencies. This is for the children of Horizon's End. This is for the families of New Eden. This is for the innocents of Paradise and Haven. The Retribution fired everything it had, not at the guard ships, but at the Council's vessel. Every railgun, every missile, every weapon focused on that single target. The guard ships tried to intercept, but it was too late. The Council's ship exploded in a flash that lit up the entire system. The guard ships destroyed the Retribution moments later. Betty Wilson died knowing she had succeeded. The Hegemony's leadership was dead, their capital world was dying, and humanity wasn't done. The neutral species watched in horror. The Zathan ambassador called another emergency session. "Do you see, now?" he asked the assembled representatives. "The humans don't just kill, they torture. They turn death into something worse than death. The screaming death could spread to any of our worlds." "It was targeted," the Trilix representative argued, weakly. "It only affected hegemony biology. This time," the Zathan said, "what about next time? What happens when humanity decides we're a threat?" As if in answer to his question, every display in the chamber activated. Carl Thompson appeared, but he wasn't in the council chambers. He was on Earth, standing in what looked like a children's playground. "I know you're all watching," Carl said. "I know you're afraid. You should be. We've become something terrible. We know this. But we want you to understand why." The playground around him filled with human children. They were laughing, playing, completely unaware of the message being recorded. "These children don't know about the war," Carl continued. "We've hidden it from them. They don't know their parents are building weapons that violate every law of war. They don't know their older siblings are training to kill. They don't know. that we've turned their entire species into a weapon. We've preserved their innocence by becoming monsters ourselves. He picked up a small girl who had run to him. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old. "This is my granddaughter," Carl said. "Her name is Sarah. Her parents were on Paradise when it was glassed. She doesn't know that. She thinks they're on a long trip. Someday, I'll have to tell her the truth. Tell her that they were burned alive by beings who didn't even ask for their surrender." He set Sarah down, and she ran back to play. "We offered the hegemony peace," Carl said, his voice hardening. "They chose war. We showed them mercy. They showed us genocide. Every horror we've unleashed has been in response to their choices. We've become the galaxy's nightmare so our children can sleep peacefully." The transmission ended. The chamber was silent. On the hegemony's remaining worlds, panic was spreading. The military tried to maintain order, but how could they? Their capital was dead. Their leadership was gone. And the humans kept coming. The siege of Corvin Prime showed how far humanity had fallen into darkness. The planet was a military stronghold with 20 billion soldiers. Humanity sent a single ship. It wasn't a warship. It was a cargo hauler that had been modified. As it approached the planet, it broadcast a simple message: "Surrender or suffer." The Boer, military commander of Corvin Prime, responded with defiance. "We are warriors. We do not surrender to lesser species." The cargo ship released its payload, billions of microscopic drones that fell like rain onto the planet. The drones didn't kill. They burrowed into the skull and attached to the optic nerves. Every being on Corvin Prime suddenly saw the same thing: their loved ones dying in agony. The visions were personalized, pulled from their own memories and fears. They saw their children burning, their parents screaming, their mates being torn apart. The visions continued for days. They couldn't close their eyes to escape because the images were being fed directly into their brains. They couldn't sleep. They couldn't think. All they could do was watch their worst fears play out over and over. The military commander lasted 3 days before he broke. His surrender message was simple: "Please make it stop. We surrender. Please." The visions ended immediately. When relief ships arrived, they found 20 billion soldiers curled in fetal positions, whimpering. Many never recovered. They spent the rest of their lives seeing shadows of the visions, jumping at sounds that reminded them of the screams. Dr. Susan White published another paper, this one titled "The Mathematics of Horror." In it, she explained humanity's strategy. The hegemony killed 7 billion humans. There are 300 billion hegemony citizens. If we killed them all, that would be 43 of theirs for every one of ours. But death is quick. Fear is forever. 1 billion traumatized enemies who spread their terror to others is worth more than 300 billion dead who are simply gone. We're not trying to win a war. We're trying to ensure no one ever makes war on humanity again. The hegemony's remaining leadership, scattered across various worlds, tried to organize resistance. They gathered their fleets, combined their forces, prepared for one last great battle. They had 500 ships. Humanity brought 50. But humanity also brought something else. They brought recordings. Every communication channel was flooded with the sounds from Xerion. 40 billion beings, dying in agony. The enemy crews could turn off their receivers, but the humans had found ways to broadcast directly through the hull using harmonic frequencies. Then came the images, projected onto space itself, using technology stolen and modified from the hegemony's own libraries. Every enemy ship was surrounded by the faces of the dead. Children from Horizon's End, families from Paradise, the elderly from Haven, all watching, all accusing. The battle lasted 4 hours. The hegemony fleet fought bravely at first, but courage failed when Captain Danny Lee of the Vengeance the T2 broadcast his message. "You're going to die today. That's certain. But you have a choice. Surrender now and die quickly. Fight, and we'll make sure you're still alive when we vent you into space. You'll have about 15 seconds to feel your blood boil and your lungs explode. Your families will receive the video." Half the hegemony fleet surrendered immediately. The other half tried to fight. They learned that Danny Lee kept his promises. Their deaths were recorded and sent to their homeworlds. Humanity had turned cruelty into a science, fear into a weapon, and mercy into a memory. The surrender came not with fanfare but with exhausted whispers. The remaining hegemony leadership, scattered across a dozen worlds, sent their message simultaneously. It was short, broken, defeated. We surrender unconditionally. Please, no more. General Frank Cooper received the message aboard humanity's flagship, the Earth's Memory. He read it once, then again. Around him, his crew waited in silence. 3 years of war, hundreds of billions dead or broken, entire worlds turned to glass or gray sludge. And now it was over. Frank stood up slowly. He was not the same man who had started this war. None of them were. They had become something else. Something necessary. Something terrible. Send a single response, he ordered. Accepted. The galaxy held its breath. Everyone expected demands. Territory, resources, technology, slaves. That's what victors took from the defeated. That's how it had always been for thousands of years of galactic warfare. Humanity asked for nothing. The surrender ceremony was held on a neutral station operated by the Zathan. General Frank Cooper arrived in a simple black uniform with no decorations except a small pin. It was a picture of the Horizon's End, the colony ship that had started it all. The hegemony's surviving leadership looked broken. Their skin colors, which had once shifted with confidence and arrogance, were now muted grays of defeat. They had prepared documents offering everything: star systems, technology, resources worth more than Earth's entire economy. Frank looked at the documents for a moment, then pushed them aside. "We want nothing from you," he said quietly. "No territory, no resources, no technology, nothing." The hegemony representatives were confused. One found the courage to speak. "Then what was the point? Why did you do all of this?" Frank stood up and walked to the viewport. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. "You killed our children. There had to be consequences. Not for territory or power, but because if we didn't respond, someone else would think they could do the same." He turned back to them. "Here are our only terms. You will never threaten humanity again. You will never threaten any species under our protection. If you do, what we've done so far will seem like mercy compared to what comes next." "That's all?" the hegemony leader asked. "That's everything," Frank replied. "Leave. Rebuild if you can. Live with what you've learned. And remember that we could have killed you all, but we chose not to. Not from mercy, but because we want you alive to remember. To warn others." The hegemony delegation left in silence. They had expected to lose everything. Instead, they had been given their lives and their worlds back. Somehow that was worse. They would spend the rest of their existence knowing they lived because humanity allowed it. In the months that followed, humanity did something that terrified the galaxy more than the war itself. They went back to being peaceful. The factories that had produced weapons were converted back to making consumer goods. The warships were mothballed or converted to exploration vessels. The soldiers became teachers and doctors and engineers again. Children came out of the bunkers and returned to schools where they learned about art and music instead of war. It was as if humanity had flipped a switch. One day they were the galaxy's greatest terror. The next, they were sending trade delegations and offering medical aid to species affected by the war. Captain Danny Lee, who had promised to make enemies watch their blood boil in space, now commanded the exploration vessel New Beginnings. He visited alien worlds with a smile, offering trade agreements and cultural exchanges. But every species he met saw the shadow behind his smile. They knew what he had done, what he could do again. Dr. Kevin Park went back to being a pediatric surgeon. He saved alien children now, traveling to worlds that had been affected by the war. He never spoke about the weapons he had created. But when alien parents thanked him for saving their children, they did so quickly and then left. They could not forget that this gentle doctor had invented the screaming death. Maria Rodriguez returned to developing crops. She created strains that could feed billions, that could grow in the harshest conditions. She gave them freely to any world that asked. But when agricultural scientists came to learn from her, they were very careful to be respectful. They remembered Thesix, an entire world turned to gray sludge by her creation. President Lisa Coleman addressed the galaxy in a broadcast that reached every inhabited world. "We are returning to what we were," she said. "Explorers, traders, friends to those who would have us. We did not want the war. We do not want to be feared. But we will not apologize for defending our people. We will not apologize for the measures we took. We did what was necessary." She paused, and when she continued, her voice was softer. "We have shown you what humanity is capable of when threatened. Now let us show you what we can be when we're not. Let us be neighbors. Let us be partners. But never forget that the choice is yours." The galaxy's response was immediate and unanimous. Acceptance of every trade offer, every medical mission, every cultural exchange. No one wanted to risk saying no. The Zathan ambassador met with the new human ambassador, Jennifer Smith. She was a small woman with a warm smile who had been a kindergarten teacher before the war. During the war, she had designed psychological warfare protocols that had broken entire fleets without firing a shot. "Your species terrifies us," the Zathan said bluntly. "You went from peaceful explorers to genocidal monsters to peaceful explorers again in the span of 3 years. How can we trust you?" Jennifer pulled out a data pad and showed him a picture. It was a group of human children playing with young Zathan in a mixed-species school that had just opened on a border world. "You can't," she said simply. "Trust is earned over time. But look at these children. They're playing together, learning together, growing up together. They don't know about the war. We've made sure of that. In a generation, maybe 2, the fear will fade." "And if someone threatens you again?" the Zathan asked. Jennifer's smile never changed, but her eyes did. For just a moment, the Zathan saw the monster that humanity could become. "Then the galaxy will be reminded why fear is sometimes wisdom," she said quietly. "But let's hope it never comes to that. We prefer being friends. It's so much more pleasant for everyone." The Zathan left the meeting deeply unsettled. The human had been perfectly pleasant, even charming. But he had seen behind the mask for just that moment. He understood now that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their brutality. It was their ability to choose what they were. 50 years passed. The war became history, taught in schools across the galaxy as the human lesson. New generations grew up knowing the story but not feeling the fear. Humans became integral to galactic society. Their traders were fair, their doctors were skilled, their explorers were brave. But certain things never changed. Pirates never attacked human vessels. Aggressive species checked star charts very carefully to make sure their targets had no human connections. When conflicts arose between other species, they often asked for human mediators, not because humans were neutral, but because no one wanted to risk angering them. Young Timothy Brooks was born 40 years after the war. He grew up on a mixed-species colony, where humans lived alongside a dozen other races. His best friend was a young hegemony whose grandfather had survived Xerion. They played together, studied together, dreamed of exploring the galaxy together. One day, Timothy asked his grandmother Ellen why the older aliens always seemed nervous around humans. Ellen had been a combat medic during the war. She had seen things that still woke her up at night. She had done things that she never spoke about. She looked at her grandson, so innocent, so unaware of what his species had done. "We showed them what happens when you threaten what humans love," she said carefully. "Some lessons are hard to forget." "But we're not dangerous," Timothy said. "We're peaceful. Everyone knows that." Ellen touched the small pin she still wore, a picture of the horizon's end. "We are peaceful, Timothy, by choice. Every day, every human chooses to be peaceful. But if that choice is ever taken away from us again..." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. In the great libraries across the galaxy, historians wrote about the war. They all came to the same conclusion, written in 1,000 different languages but conveying the same message. The war was so brutal, the galaxy whispers humanity's name in fear. Not because humans are evil, but because they can choose to be. They can be the kindest friends or the cruelest enemies. They can save worlds or burn them. They can heal or destroy. And the transition between the two is as simple as a human deciding that peace is no longer an option. Every species in the galaxy learned the same lesson. Humans would rather build schools than warships. They would rather trade than raid. They would rather sing than scream. But if you took that choice away, if you threatened their young, if you killed their innocence, then you would learn why humanity had survived on a death world. You would learn why they were the apex predators of Earth. You would learn why the galaxy now whispered their name in fear, and you would wish, in your final moments, that you had chosen differently when they offered you friendship. The galaxy was at peace, not because humanity enforced it, but because everyone remembered what happened when it wasn't. The children played, the traders traded, the explorers explored, and in the dark spaces between stars, the whispers continued.